people like me. You need people like me so you can point your fingers and say, that's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy.
Okay, we'll start with this. This weekend in Germany, in the women's atomweight division, the prediction stuck, and two-division champion Tina Ruprecht went on to become its inaugural undisputed champion by beating Sumire Yamanaka. Inaugural meaning there's never been an undisputed champion at this weight. Tina would be the first, and not just that, she's the first German-born undisputed champion, certainly in the four-belt era. There hasn't been a German-born undisputed champion in the four-belt era, male or female. Tina is the first. Tina Ruprecht, who ranks in at number 3 on the Ring IQ pound-for-pound list, right behind Clarissa Shields and Katie Taylor. This monumental achievement may not be enough for her to move past them, since they've been undisputed champions too, and at more than one weight, but it is enough for her to facilitate her spot and make it that much more difficult for the girls ranked behind her to move ahead of her. Yokastavalle, who Tina Ruprecht beat years ago, Alicia Baumgartner, Michaela Mayer, Terry Harper, Gabby Fundora, Lauren Price, Dina Thorsland. As always, the fighters ranked on the list are interchangeable based on what accolades they add to their CV, what accomplishments they amass. For example, if Dina Thorsland, who's currently ranked at number 10, becomes undisputed champion in the super bantamweight division, she may end up ahead of Tina on the premise that she's been a two-weight champion like Tina, and if she adds undisputed to that list of accomplishments, that will give her a credible enough argument to move past her. Even though she's ranked at the bottom right now, Dina is about 2 belts away from achieving that goal. Back over to Tina, who ranks in at number 3. Tina Ruprecht has beaten 3 champions across 2 divisions and taken belts from them. She's got a victory over Yokastavalle that's aging really well. The question is, what is she going to do now that she's become the atomweight division's very first undisputed champion? Does she stay there? Does she reign there? Or does she move back up to the minimum weight division and see about maybe starting over, shooting for undisputed up there, maybe having a rematch with Yokastavalle? Not that she needs one, because she doesn't. Yokasta's the one that needs revenge. Maybe Tina can have a domestic clash with Sarah Borman, also of Germany, newly crowned WBO minimum weight champion. The reason for it: Tina Ruprecht is only 32 years old. Many good years left to give to the sport of boxing if she so chooses to continue, and she might, moving back up to the minimum weight division where she reigned as WBC champion for some years before moving down and starting this undisputed campaign. She could always move back up, challenge Sarah or challenge Yokastia. She doesn't have to stop here, but she could. If Tina Ruprecht retired tomorrow, it's almost a guarantee that she gets into the Hall of Fame, because she's the inaugural undisputed champion at her weight. For any fighter, male or female, becoming undisputed champion is a good way to get your ticket punched into the Hall of Fame. But it helps Tina's situation that Germany doesn't actually produce that many champions in the sport of boxing, let alone undisputed champions, and that she's the first. Not just the first German-born undisputed champion, but the first that the division has ever seen. That makes her case stand out even more. She was already WBC champion for some years in the minimum weight division, several successful title defenses. This just adds to it that Tina could retire tomorrow and get into the Hall, but because she's 32, she may decide to keep going. Reintegrating herself into the minimum weight division, she would easily become Yokastavalle's biggest threat. her biggest competition. And you could give her very good odds against Sarah Borman. The edge and experience would certainly go to Tina more than Sarah. Same applies to Yuko Kuroki of Japan, that division's WBA champion, that Tina doesn't have to stop here. She can move back up and be competitive against any one of the minimum weight champions that are there right now. So congratulations to her. The prediction stuck. I knew she could do it, and she did it.
Congratulations, Tszyu. I see you got through with that appetizer. I got through with mine. I got them out in 3, you got them out in 4. I don't know about you, boy, but I'm still hungry. Send the contract. I'll sign it by tonight. I promise you, I'll come to Australia and give you a good fight. Let's go.
Encouraging news as it pertains to the potential Tszyu versus Keith Thurman super fight. Oh yes, this could be a super fight in Australia, maybe not in America, but who's to say that the only big fights that are big fights have to happen in America? This is not your father's era of boxing, and if opportunities were all over the place for a fighter like Keith Thurman in the United States, then he would have been fighting here, getting offers to do a fight here. As it stands, the only real money on the table for Keith so far is in the land down under. Not dissimilar from how old hip-hop acts from the previous era can still make money in the postmodern era touring abroad. They may not be what they used to be in their own neck of the woods, but a little somewhere else, and they might be able to make some coin off of their body of work so far. It's very much the case when it comes to Keith Thurman. If you tried to do a main event for Keith Thurman here in the United States, not a lot of people are gonna show up. But out there, it's a treat because you get to see a fighter you've never seen live. You've only ever seen him on television. I've still got my reservations as to whether or not Keith Thurman will actually go through with this fight because on one end, this may be the biggest offer for him on the table right now, but on the other end of it, he's always been an opportunist. When he was a champion. When he was a champion, I remember him shouting across the room for a Paulie Malignaggi fight. Paulie Malignaggi. He had a lot more energy for Paulie than he had for a unification match with Kell Brook. He had a lot more energy for Danny Garcia, who had just moved up to the welterweight division, than he had for Kell Brook, who had already been a champion for some years. You understand? That Keith Thurman is very selective with who he targets and what fights he goes through with. Remember, there was a time when Keith Thurman versus Errol Spence Jr. was a hot topic, a hot button topic, but Keith never had the energy for Errol that he kept for Danny Garcia, that he kept for Paulie Malignaggi. He's always been like this. And so I haven't forgotten how Keith Thurman was when he was in his prime, because he's not there anymore. He's in his mid-30s. He was always very selective, even when he was a younger and more active fighter. He was always a picky eater. And you can go to Australia for a Brock Jarvis with the peace of mind that this is a guy who used to fight as low as 135. He's not that good, and he got knocked out in one round at 140. So when you fight him at 154, it's doable. You can go down there with some confidence that you can take it out of the judge's hands. However, fighting Tszyu is something else. So granted that he's been knocked out too, he has, by a bigger man than you. Don't leave that part out. So I maintain some skepticism as to whether or not Keith Thurman will actually go through with this fight. I hope that he does, because it is intriguing, stylistically. It's a good fight. You don't need an alphabet title to sell it. You don't need the alphabets to crash that party to make it a hot ticket in Australia. I think you can do this one in a stadium. It's definitely box office worthy down there. For a fight that I think would yield shades of Thurman versus Collazo in tandem with shades of Tszyu versus Harrison. I think Timmy wins the fight. I think Timmy could be the first to stop Keith Thurman if he goes through with this thing, because we know what Keith's gonna do. He's gonna try to move around, use the ring, walk Tszyu into a trap, into a counter, try to hurt him and move in for the kill, whereas Timmy's gonna tuck himself behind that high guard, try to catch and shoot on his way in, crash the pocket, close the distance, and let go of hooks, let go of uppercuts, mid-range to inside. When he's on his game, when he's not acting stupid and throwing stupid punches like he did in the Bakram Murtazaliev fight. I said it then, he didn't give Bakram enough respect. He was arrogant, and he paid for it dearly, but I think he's learned his lesson.
I think he has. And I know that he's better than what he showed in that fight.
Because I've seen it. I've seen it in other fights with other solid fighters, other solid junior middleweights, where some others think Timmy is a hype job.
I saw friend of the channel, Alexis Rumbero, react to Timmy's win this weekend by saying, "That's the thing about boxing fans. No matter the evidence to the contrary, they'll quickly forgive and reinstate an exposed hype job to former glory after a good performance versus another exposed hype job."
And I don't agree with any of that. I remember years ago when Tszyu fought Takeshi Inoue, the same Takeshi Inoue that gave Jaime Munguia a hell of a hard time, hell for leather kind of fight. Timmy beat him easy. Timmy dominated him.
I remember when he fought Brian Mendoza. Right after Brian knocked out the towering Inferno, he fought Timmy, and Timmy beat him easy.
Dominated him. And what about when he made his U.S. debut in Minneapolis at the Armory? The PBC were setting him up. They were setting him up by putting him in there with a former U.S. Olympian in Terrell Gachet. And what did Timmy do? He survived an early scare and went on to dominate the fight.
I don't think Timmy is a hype job. I don't think he's God's gift to boxing either.
But he's not a hype job. The kid can fight. And I think a fight between him and Keith would look a lot like the fight that he had with former champion Tony Harrison, another PBC alum, who is a taller, longer fighter than Tszyu, and even taller and longer than Keith Thurman.
Why does that matter?
Ring coverage. Longer legs make for longer strides, allowing a fighter to cover more ground in just a few steps, and a generous wingspan makes for more ring coverage that you don't need to be close to a guy to touch him. And in spite of his physical dimensions, Tony Harrison wasn't able to keep Tszyu off.
He's a bigger guy than Keith.
So when I think about Keith and how he's going to fight this fight, he's going to do the same thing. He's going to try to move and punch, set traps. Timmy's going to put the pressure on him, coming forward, catching and shooting out of the high guard,
Getting in with occasional body shots. And we all know that Keith Thurman doesn't like it to the body. He's never liked it to the body.
Yeah, but he's also never been stopped.
There's a first time for everything.
I think that if Tim Tszyu does with Keith Thurman what he did with Brian Mendoza, what he did with Tony Harrison, he knocks him out. He gets him out of there. That's what I think.
It's a good fight.
And what is the rehabilitation effort to get Tszyu back to the top? It's not enough to beat up Joey Spencer. I knew that he could. Now, let's see him beat up Keith Thurman.
I think he can.
Now it's just a question of how much money are they going to have to put up to get Keith Thurman back to Australia.
Elsewhere in the junior middleweight division, Sergey Bohachuk returns next month on the 17th against Mikhail Fox and plans to face Bakram Murtazaliev afterwards.
Sergey Bohachuk is keeping busy with hopes of getting bigger bouts. The power-punching Bohachuk, 25-2 with 24 knockouts, will return to the ring on May 17th, with the targeted opponent being the lanky and crafty lefty Mikhail Fox, 24-4 with 5 knockouts. Bohachuk promoter Tom Loeffler told The Ring the bout will headline a 360 promotion show on UFC Fight Pass at the Commerce Casino in LA, California. If The Ring and WBC #1 ranked junior middleweight contender gets past Fox, Loeffler is bullish they can move on to land a meaningful matchup against IBF champion Bakram Murtazaliev. We want to keep Sergey active, and we'll continue to look for big fights after that, Loeffler told The Ring in an interview. He's the type of guy that wants to fight everyone. He's right there in the mix. We want to get him to a world title as soon as possible. Yeah, absolutely, Murtazaliev is in consideration. That's a tremendous, can't-miss fight of the year type of fight. Both guys are huge punchers and strong guys. They're warriors, and they are both willing to fight each other. Sergey has agreed to fight Bakram, and my understanding is that Bakram has agreed too. It's just a matter of finding a spot or a show to put that fight on. It would be a tremendous fight on the Canelo Alvarez versus Terence Crawford show. El Flaco Bohachuk had a banner 2024 campaign by beating Brian Mendoza, dropping a highly disputed majority decision against Virgil Ortiz, despite knocking down Ortiz 2 times and knocking out Ishmael Davis. The 29-year-old Ukrainian was also snake-bitten last year by missing out on big fights after they were announced because his opponents had other plans. Bohachuk was slated to face Sebastian Fundora instead of Mendoza and Israel Madrimov instead of Davis. The professor, Fox, from Upper Marlboro, New Maryland, landed back-to-back wins last year after losing 3 straight decisions to Luke Santamaria, Gabriel Maestre, and Egidijus Kavaliauskas from 2020 to 2022. Now the professor is back in the winner's bracket, coming off of 2 consecutive wins.
He's about to fight Sergey.
Now, as far as Bohachuk versus Fox, I think that fight is going to go the same way the Kavaliauskas fight did, for the same reason. Egis Kavaliauskas is a come-forward pressure guy, volume guy, power guy, and so is Sergey Bohachuk, just bigger.
That if you couldn't keep Egis off of you, I hardly think you're going to keep Sergey off of you. He throws even more punches than Egis, without gassing out.
And that's nothing against Mikhail Fox, that's just what I think is going to happen when they fight. And beyond that fight, a Bakram Murtazaliev fight, according to Tom Loeffler, both teams have agreed to do it. They just need to find a slot for that fight on a bigger show. And you ask yourself, well, if they've both agreed to fight, why not just do it on UFC Fight Pass?
Money.
They want to make money. And UFC Fight Pass isn't giving Tom Loeffler the kind of money to where he can promote a show like that on his own. Main Event, who handles the career of Bakram Murtazaliev, the IBF champion, they don't have a broadcast deal to where they could do a fight like that on their own.
Now that's the same Main Events and the same Kathy Duva that used to handle the career of Sergey Kovalev way back when, in the days of HBO, but in the subsequent years that have followed HBO's departure from boxing, Main Events ain't what they used to be.
Now, they're still around, obviously, and they still have 1 or 2 fighters that they're handling, but they don't have it to where they can do this fight on their own. They need somebody else to pay for it. Tom Loeffler made the recommendation that this would be a great fight to put on the undercard of Canelo versus Crawford in September. I second that motion. I would love to see that fight on that undercard, but he did so with good reason. The only chance 2 fighters like Sergey and Bakram have to make a decent-sized purse is if Turkey uses them, because in the American boxing scene, a Ukrainian fighter and a Russian fighter,
They ain't gonna draw but so much.
they're just not, even though a fight between them would be pure fireworks. It's really one of the best fights you can hope to make at 154 pounds, but Americans, being as xenophobic as they are, unless there's an American involved or a Puerto Rican involved, a Mexican involved, they're just not that interested.
So ideally, you would have somebody else pick up this fight and add it to the undercard of a bigger show. I love Tom's recommendation.
Who wins?
It's very hard to say. Given the punching power and countering ability of Bakram Murtazaliev, he's not really a guy you want to stand right in front of letting punches go. He can catch you in between, and we saw that in the Tszyu fight. At the same time, Sergey's a bigger guy than Tszyu. He's pretty big as far as junior middleweights go.
And his defenses have improved from the time that he was knocked out by Brandon Adams, to where if his defenses hold, maybe he can overwhelm Bakram Murtazaliev. Throwing so much at him, so often, whilst being defensively responsible, that maybe Bakram won't know what to do. It is an excellent fight, a bona fide 50-50 pick'em fight.
Pick 'em fight!
I hope we get to see it.